Well, good afternoon again. My name is Matt Chase. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Counties. It's a real honor and privilege to be here today in this distinguished room to talk about one of the issues at the forefront of America's public policy agenda, and that's criminal justice reform. And what we're here to talk about today is the role of America's 3,069 county governments in the criminal justice system. Some people might call it the front door or the back door or the middle of the system. But what's clear is that America's county governments play an instrumental role in America's criminal justice system, not just for those that are going through the criminal justice process, but also their families and the communities that we serve. So we're here today to listen to some very distinguished county elected officials from across America of how we are involved, and as U.S. Congress, the administration, our governors and legislatures deal with criminal justice reform at the federal and state level, because counties really need to be engaged. When we talk about the criminal justice system from the county level, we typically start with our jails, and that's just one piece. There's a lot of conversation about federal and state prison reform, but you can't do prison reform without dealing with the county. Otherwise, we'll have recidivism and our citizens coming right back to our front door. So as we deal with sentencing reform and how we lower our mass incarceration numbers, we have to look at it from a systematic and holistic perspective. The counties also play a key role in the courts with the district attorneys, the public defenders, but increasingly with behavioral health, substance abuse, and family services. And we have some great speakers today who are going to talk about that wraparound for the families and for the individuals involved in this process. In the last couple of weeks, we've been dealing with a whole host of different initiatives. One is called our Stepping Up Initiative, which we launched with the Council of State Governments, as well as the American Psychiatric Foundation. Stepping Up is simply about why are we criminalizing the mental health, the mentally ill, through our mental health system and through our jails, especially through the incarceration in our jails. So we've been looking at not just waiting for the federal government and for the states to rescue us, but counties working together across our departments to really tackle this issue. Yesterday, we announced a new national initiative with the National League of Cities around opioid and heroin abuse, and how can cities and counties come together and tackle this really devastating issue that's happening across the country. And in the coming weeks, we'll be working around poverty and economic opportunity. Today, though, again, as I said, we're going to focus on the criminal justice system. We're really honored to be joined as co-sponsors by the National Association of County Behavioral Health and Disability Directors and our partners at the American Jail Association. Both of these affiliates and partners have been exceptional in helping us with research, best practices, and increasingly with policy. So it's really great to see all the different pieces of county government coming together with our elected and appointed experts to deal with this. At this point, I want to introduce our president, Commissioner Sally Clark from El Paso County, Colorado, who her whole presidential initiative is about safe and secure communities. I'm sure she'll get into that. But with that, I'll introduce Commissioner Clark.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Sally Clark, and I serve on the Board of Commissioners of El Paso County, Colorado, which some of you may know as Colorado Springs and the Pikes Peak area. I'm also privileged to serve as NACo's current president. After I was elected by my county peers to serve as the organization's president, I worked with them to launch the Safe and Secure Counties Initiative. Since I hail from an area of the country that has been ravaged by wildfires and floods in the last several years, the initiative places a special focus on protecting communities from natural disasters and helping them recover when those disasters occur. But protecting our communities from disasters is not the only way that we work to keep our communities safe and secure. We also do this by bringing innovative and results-oriented decision-making to our local justice systems so that they operate in a way that gives those who come into contact with the system the best chance of remaining a productive part of the communities that they're from. For those who end up in our jails, we work to help them reintegrate back into our communities. These individuals have complex needs when they're released from jails, ranging from employment, health, education, and housing. And if these needs are not met, then they are much likelier to return to our jails, the recidivism, and an outcome that's not good for the individual and not good for the community, and certainly not good for our country. So I'm here and excited to be here with my NACo colleagues today to tell you about some of these programs. And I want to introduce you to one of our most vibrant members, Supervisor Don Knabe of Los Angeles County, California. His county has a population that's greater than 40 of our states, and he's been serving the people of Los Angeles in his current position for nearly 20 years. Supervisor Don Knabe, take it away.
Thank you, Sally, and good afternoon, everyone. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share a few words with you about what we're doing in our jail system. Let me sort of put our system in perspective for all of you. Los Angeles County has the largest jail system in America, with an average daily population of some 18,000 inmates. Our jail system is larger than Rikers Island in New York and Cook County Jail combined. So you can see the kinds of numbers. Right now, we do not hold pretrial misdemeanors in custody. To do so would add another 10,000 beds to our need in our system. The county requires that sentenced inmates serve only 70% of their time. We'd like them to serve the full sentence, but to do so, we'd have to have another 4,000 beds. So you may have heard of California's realignment, a fun word for all of us in Los Angeles County and other counties in the state, which required lower-level felons serve their time in county jails rather than state prison. So they just shifted the burden back to us. That was part of the effort to reduce overcrowding in our California state prison system. As a result of that, Los Angeles County, our system, holds up to 5,000 inmates a day who would have previously been in state prison. They're held regardless of the length of sentence, with one inmate inside there serving a 42-year jail sentence. So now that you have an idea about the sheer scope and size of what we do, here are some of the things we're trying to deal with. Sadly and unfortunately, our county jail is also the largest psychiatric treatment facility in the nation. We have over 4,000 inmates diagnosed with mental illness currently, and those numbers are expected to rise. To address this, we integrated our departments of health services, a Department of Mental Health, and a Department of Public Health into one health agency. Each of these departments have been dealing separately, providing service within the jail system, but not necessarily coordinating. By bringing them together, we're going to have a coordinated operation. We have integrated these three functions within the jail, and we focused the efforts to initiating treatment while in custody and then ensuring the treatment continues post-sentence. So far, we've had pretty good results. I'm happy to say that we've been able to move some of the county's most severely impaired mentally ill offenders from custody to appropriate clinical settings to receive that care. While I'm encouraged by the integrated efforts, we also need to look at the jail facilities themselves, and this is where the numbers get pretty big. If you've ever had the pleasure of touring our Men's Central Jail downtown Los Angeles, you would know what a house of horrors it is. And by the way, I'm glad to arrange any tour if you'd like to go see that house of horrors. No tickets needed. But we can't not provide rehabilitation services in that setting. So last year, my colleagues and I approved the construction of a 4,000-bed correctional treatment center. The facility will be the largest kind of its kind in the country at a cost of about $2 billion to construct and hundreds of millions of dollars a year to operate. Like many of you, one of the other things that we're working to do is to find alternative solutions to incarceration, particularly for the low-level offenders who would be better served in community-based settings. The board, we recently created within the last year the Office of Diversion and Reentry to oversee the increasing number of diversion programs the county is implementing. We put over $100 million into this office, $85 million in one-time funding, and $24 million a year in ongoing funding. Through this new office, we want to create more options for treatment of the low-level offenders, as I mentioned, particularly with the significant mental health issues and/or substance abuse disorders that who have been historically lost in our jail system. Obviously, housing is a very important aspect of the diversion strategy, and we've set a goal of providing at least 1,000 units of permanent supportive housing to this population over 5 years, starting with 200 units this year. We are also working very closely, like many of you, with our district attorney to look at ways to divert low-risk mentally ill from the jails to community settings through a number of approaches, such as specialized courts, as well as community-based alternatives to custody. In addition, we are also working very hard to prepare the inmates for release, such as ensuring that their IDs are up to date, healthcare plan enrollment, offering GED programs and other educational opportunities, lining up housing, particularly for the severely mentally ill and homeless that cycle in and out of our systems like many of you. And while diversion is something that must happen, and I fully support it, we cannot treat substance abuse and mental illness in jail settings. But we also have to be realistic about crime and criminal activity. Frankly, there are some really bad dudes out there that aren't mentally ill, but need to be put away. So I want to ensure that we can help those that are caught up in our system transition to a productive life, but we have to be careful about not compromising, it's a fine line, compromising public safety at the same time. That's why we've been advocating for a balanced approach to criminal justice reform to ensure that we retain enough capacity to incarcerate those who need to be, yet also maintain the ability to rehabilitate and divert those who just aren't criminals, but find themselves entangled in our criminal justice system. Thank you for your time. Now I introduce a colleague, past NACo President, Judge Glenn Whitley.
Well, unfortunately, we just recently received word that Senator Cornyn has had something that's come up and he is not going to be able to make it. But I want to tell you a little bit about the man and his, I think, steadfast support of what we're here to do. Senator Cornyn served the citizens of Texas for the last 3 decades. He actually started off as a district judge and then was a member of the Texas Supreme Court, and then from there was elected Attorney General. So a lot of knowledge and experience in the whole effort of criminal justice. He was elected as senator in 2002, and since then has been recently selected by his colleagues to serve as the Senate's Majority Whip. Again, his experience as a former district judge and member of the Texas Supreme Court has given him the expertise which has really followed through to make him committed to reforming our criminal justice system, really from the very beginning of the sentencing all the way through to the reintroduction back into society. He is very steadfast in wanting to end federal unfunded mandates. And that is something that certainly we're always interested in and want to make sure that it sits in front of our both our senators as well as our House. Counties know firsthand the importance of reforming the criminal justice system. There's been a lot of dialogue, certainly recently at our ledge and our annual meetings, about looking at this whole sentencing system that have folks in jails for a long time on nonviolent and just almost federally mandated type sentencing. NACo also supports measures that are aimed at reducing the disparity in the sentencing, as well as eliminating, as I just mentioned, the unnecessary confinement. We hope that through the process that we're undertaking, that we can really develop a more rational and appropriate sentencing policies. And I know that the senator, with his experience as both a district judge and as a member of the Texas Supreme Court, understands that and would very much like to have been here today to be able to talk about that and to hear input from the crowd. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Matt Chase.
Thank you, Judge. So as Supervisor Kanabe stated, public safety is really our first goal, to keep our communities safe and secure, but with a balanced approach to make sure the system has those that really truly deserve to be in there. Our next speaker was recently a distinguished guest of the First Lady of the United States during the President's State of the Union address. And what's interesting, he was invited as actually a Republican county mayor from Shelby County, Tennessee. The county mayor, Mark Luttrell, has a distinguished career of over 30 years in corrections, having served with the Federal Bureau of Corrections, as well as the sheriff of Shelby County and now the county elected executive. So it's really my honor to bring up Mayor Mark Luttrell to give us a couple of words from the Shelby County, Tennessee perspective. Mayor Luttrell.
Well, thank you, Matt, and certainly to President Clark and the NACo leadership, thank you for really highlighting the issues of criminal justice in such a profound way. Over the last 2 days, we've had many opportunities to kind of weigh in on the whole issue of criminal justice, and I think it's certainly productive for all of us. Let me start by really kind of framing what we really mean by criminal justice reform. Let me say right off that I do not think that the objective of criminal justice reform should be to reduce prison populations. Certainly that should be a byproduct of criminal justice reform, but I think the reality of it is that there are people who need to be in prison. There are some people that need to be in prison for extended periods of time. But yet we also know there are many people in prison that could be more effectively and more efficiently handled outside the perimeter of a prison. Equity in sentencing. Certainly ensuring that constitutional standards are maintained within our jails and prisons. And certainly that all defendants in criminal actions receive the full benefits of our great Constitution. When we look at the role of counties, walk with me for a moment of just how engaged counties are in the criminal justice system. Starting with the arrest and investigation. Who does the DA rely upon to build a case? The arresting officers. In our counties, certainly the sheriff's office, a county function, but then also all the other police jurisdictions within the community. The arrest, the investigation, now they come into the back door of the jail, receiving and discharge, once again, manned by county, to ensure proper classification, to ensure that upon the initial entry into the criminal justice system, the classification certainly is exercised. Pretrial services, once again, county. District attorney and public defenders. District attorney we think of quite often as being the state function, yet in Shelby County, Tennessee, there's a huge involvement on the part of the county. Public defender. Every time we raise the capacity of our district attorney's office in Tennessee, we must also raise the capacity of our public defender's office. Juvenile court. Some juveniles in our juvenile court system are remanded for criminal prosecution. Juvenile court is managed by our county. The pass off to the adult system certainly is engaging. Detention or diversion, jail detention, and sometimes months, in many cases years, before a case is adjudicated. The jail, responsibility of the county. Victim services, Family Safety Center, Crime Victim Center, Rape Crisis Center, county. The trial, the jury commission comes under the county. Responsibilities there, significant bureaucracy. Many of our jails across the United States are also housing state prisoners. And I'd venture to say there's not a single county that's getting full reimbursement for housing state prisoners. Release and reentry, so vital, because statistics will tell you that the percentage of people returning to our jails and prisons is significant. And if we don't invest in our reentry programs, then we're missing a very vital function. Back in 2007, in Shelby County, we established what we refer to as our Operation Safe Community program. The genesis of Operation Safe Community began with the City of Memphis mayor, my predecessor, the Shelby County mayor, myself as the sheriff and the police director of Memphis. We sat down at a table and said something more must be done than what we have been doing. If we only focus on arrest and prosecution and conviction, we're just reaping the harvest. If we don't also invest in intervention and prevention, then the criminal behaviors that we are witnessing will continue to grow. We established programs in suppression. We focused on prevention programs, saving our babies and our children, and then also the intervention programs that break that cycle of crime, in many cases in the formative stages of criminal development. Most recently, I have engaged in an initiative that is moving across the country called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Program, ACE. What ACE does is it looks at the impact of adverse childhood experiences on the growth and development, the physical and the mental growth and development of our children. Because I would venture to say that when you watch the 10 o'clock news and you see the apprehension of an offender, what you don't see is the 5, 10, and 10 years that led up to that event. And in more and more cases, you will identify adverse childhood experiences. ACE is moving across the nation, and if we don't embrace the opportunity to fight crime at that original origin of life, then we're missing significant responsibilities. Is our Operation Safe Community program working? It's been in existence since 2007. So many of the issues that we face are systemic issues that take years and years to address. Prevention programs, starting today with our babies. We may not see the impact of that for years. I think we are making progress in the sense that part of the progress is process, developing process, refining process, putting process in place, and then working that process as we move forward. Looking at our strategies that we are initiating under Operation Safe Community to really see where adjustments must be made in those three areas. So fighting crime involves more than just good arrest procedures, good police training, better weaponry. It involves investing in pre-kindergarten. It involves investing in early Head Start. It involves investing in K through 3 education. It starts by investing in job development so that when we can bring that child, that baby, to the age of accountability, they are there to assume the responsibilities. This past year, I, along with 40 other Tennesseans, was appointed by our governor to a task force within Tennessee that focuses on criminal justice reform. And I think, President Clark, it was you yesterday that made the comment in some of your remarks about how it's important to have collaboration at the federal and the state level and the local level if we're truly going to make an impact on the issues of crime in our society. In our report to the governor, which he's incorporated into this year's budget and also in subsequent budgets going forward, we gave him a list of 16 opportunities to have an impact on criminal behavior. I don't want to go through all 16 of them, but I want to highlight just 7 of them that I think are important toward criminal justice reform. Truth in sentencing. Victims deserve truth in sentencing. Victims deserve to know the people that are being incarcerated and convicted for the crimes. Victims need to know what the repercussions are and what the expectations are for sentencing. Specialty courts. We've talked time and time again about the importance of mental health and the increasing issues and challenges that we have of mental health cases within our correctional facilities. Drug courts, veterans courts, domestic violence courts. Those are the 4 courts that we've been able to establish in Shelby County. Again, trying to discern early on ways to deal with the criminal behavior short of lengthy incarceration. Individualized case management plans while a person is in prison. as they come into the prison environment, immediately work on those plans that can progressively move them toward their release. Going back to the truth in sentencing objective, truth in sentencing would have a minimum required incarceration period. That if an inmate meets all of the standards that are placed before them through these plans that are established, they then could get out in the minimum period of time. Failure to meet those standards would extend their incarceration to a maximum period. But certainly the importance of individualized case management programs. Post-release community supervision. Everyone released from our correctional facilities should have some post-release conditions, some standards that must be met. The importance of continuing to follow up. The third rail of criminal justice discussion, more aggressive diagnosis and treatment of issues related to sexual offenders. So often, dealing with sexual offenders is an issue that's very sensitive, that we see our public officials fearful of addressing. But folks, the sexual offenders will be back out on the street. And if we don't do something more than restricting their access to particular neighborhoods or particular areas of town, we once again are not addressing the core issues of what must be done to address the offense of sexual offenses. How do we pay for all of this? That was one of the objectives that we talked about in our study for the governor, because it's not cheap. All of these issues that we've talked about, the investment in programs for prevention, the intervention programs, cost money. We're experimenting now with the issue of social impact bonds. How can we, through Pay for Success initiatives, encourage our citizens, our altruistic citizens in many cases, to invest in those programs that can have a benefit and a return on investment? It's a novel approach to financing. But folks, it's going to be an expensive process. We must look for alternatives to asking our taxpayers to do more and more for the challenges that we have. And what are the challenges that we face? Certainly slow progress. The needle does not move quickly when we talk about criminal justice reform. Philosophical differences. There still are many in our society who believe in very strict punishment standards. Certainly the cost. Some people just cannot be reached through programming and rehabilitation efforts. A challenge in so many cases. And certainly the pain of victimization, continuing to reach out and deal with the pain of our victims. But I do think we have a unique opportunity this year, and I think one of the reasons that I was invited to be a part of the State of the Union address was that it was an opportunity to highlight the bipartisanship that can take place around this issue. And we are seeing Democrats and Republicans and liberals and conservatives that come together around this common cause. Momentum is underway. I was talking to a couple of our congressional members over the past week, and they're fearful that with all the issues that are taking place in the election year, that criminal justice reform may be neglected. And I think the challenge that we have as county officials, and certainly for others who are in the crowd, that we focus on the momentum that we've had over the last year and continue to build upon that going forward. Building momentum, building upon the momentum that we've had and sustaining it with the efforts that we can initiate both at the state and local level. Counties make a difference in the fight for criminal justice reform. Counties probably financially have the largest stake in reform of criminal justice reform. I like to say that we approach criminal justice reform for two reasons. It's a humanitarian right thing to do, and it's the cost-effective way to do it. And finding innovative ways through things like social impact bonds to help in the financing is certainly a progressive way to move forward. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you all for your attentiveness. Go back home and do your work in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Luttrell. That was very eloquent and passionate and a lot of experience behind those remarks. As the theme of this session is about justice reform starts locally, we're going to turn to the chair of our NACo's Justice and Public Safety Committee, Commissioner Sally Hayman, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the federal legislation, but also give case studies from the Miami-Dade County experience in South Florida. Come on up.
Good afternoon. I'm Sally Hayman. I'm from Miami-Dade County. I have a background in criminal justice. I am a practitioner in public safety and law. And I'm a county commissioner, and I believe that all of us stand with a priority of public safety in mind for us, our families, others, and all of the property that inclusive to our own communities. Counties are the implementers. We are the operators. We are the first contact in the criminal justice system. As a nation, unfortunately, we are one of over-criminalization and over-incarceration. And it falls to us at the local government levels, cities and counties, to deal with that. But finally, and with hope, we are now a bipartisan nation of governments at all levels realizing we need reform and actively engaging and working together to get there. Now is the time, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues that are here at all levels of public service, for intelligent, stakeholder, inclusive partnerships. We get it. It doesn't happen by us, one entity, ourselves, but collectively. And now is the time to collectively carry out criminal justice reform from the bottom up and the top at the White House down. As counties, we stand for and with Senator Franken, Grassley, and the U.S. Senate members who intelligently and inclusively, with input even from NACo and others, passed Senator Franken's Comprehensive Justice and Mental Health Act. It was Senate 993. And what was important is the collective, collaborative effort to realize what needed to be passed in language to be implemented in action down at the county level. Now is the time for us to pass what passed at the House Judiciary, and we need the companion bill, House 1854, to get to the House floor. It passed the Judiciary. We need it to the floor. We need it to the White House. And the logic of that legislation will come to our communities, our jails, and our mental health population and drug-addicted citizenry across this country. Can I assume you're not waving at me, but you want my attention? Okay. Okay. Thank you. I'm a public figure, but I'm new to this, in this beautiful environment, so I wasn't sure of the prompting. What I'd like to speak specific to is Miami-Dade. Just like my county counterparts, we are the face of service when it comes to smart justice, the Stepping Up initiative. We have citizen citations to keep people out of the system because arresting them is detrimental to them. We have crisis intervention training for police officers to deal with those with mental illness and mental health problems to assure they don't get into a system of mere incarceration rather than assistance in treatment while we pursue public safety. The programs, whether it's from Mayor Luttrell or soon to hear from Chair Eves and many others, are a mass accumulation of best practices and our successes. Working together, Miami-Dade County and counties throughout this country are at the ground zero. We are the implementers, and ladies and gentlemen, working with good federal law, we are the solutions. I look forward to working together with my colleagues at NACo, other public servants at all levels, as we work through the solutions and through the challenges. Thank you very much for enduring me. Thank you very much for your attentiveness. And with that, I'd like to introduce, if I might, the next speaker. He is also part of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety team, and in a collaborative effort, actually, my colleague on the health side of NACo that works together, realizing criminal justice and health is a natural togetherness, because mental health in our criminal justice system is something daunting, but it can be resolved. With that, Commissioner Tony Carter from the great state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I just want to share that I am from Ramsey County. I'm a county commissioner. I have the honor of serving as chair of the National Association of Counties Human Services and Education Committee, which does engage the aspects of mental health support that are so important in this issue. For us, this is such a critical issue that I am delighted to introduce our next speaker. The last time I saw Senator Franken, we were here in D.C., and we were announcing the Stepping Up Initiative, which is a joint project of the National Association of Counties, the Council of State Governments, and the American Psychiatric Association, to reduce the preponderance of people with mental illness in our jails. The initiative encourages all of our counties to draw together collaborations of decision makers within our agencies and also stakeholders from within our communities to address this very important issue. I want to tell the senator that the last time we were here, we were introducing that initiative, and today, Senator, we have an update for you. Since we stood together in May, 235 counties from the United States have stepped up to stepping up. We're really thrilled, but you know we could not have done it without the Senator's efforts in passing legislation such as S993 that supports the initiative's goals. The Senator is a great friend to America's counties, and so we are honored to have Senator Franken here with us today. I don't see him, but I know, there you are.
Thank you, Tony. Tony is a good friend and a great county commissioner, and thank you for that kind introduction and for the work that you're doing, and for NACo and the work that you're doing. You've long been recognized for your work, your focus on mental health in our criminal justice system, and for bringing together stakeholders at the county level, where 1/3 of our nation's incarcerated individuals are located, and that you have been working on solving a very serious problem. So I'm heartened to see this issue getting the attention that it deserves. The United States has 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prison population, in large part because we have criminalized mental health. People with mental health conditions are disproportionately arrested and incarcerated. And as county officials know all too well, that's because the United States
lacks the infrastructure necessary to help them find stability. We don't provide people who suffer from mental illness. We don't provide care for them, community support, housing assistance that could help avert a crisis. We don't provide them with treatment. Instead, we let them fall through the cracks and languish in our prisons. As Hennepin County Sheriff Rich Stanek from my home state, Hennepin County is the largest county in our state, says local jails are the largest mental health facilities in the state of Minnesota. And this holds true across the nation, as you all know too well. Sheriff Stanek called it society's dirty little secret. Right now, in most jurisdictions in our country, we're using our criminal justice system as a substitute for a fully functioning mental health system. That does not make sense. It doesn't make sense for law enforcement officers who often put their lives at risk when they're called upon to intervene in a mental health crisis. It doesn't make sense for the courts, which are inundated with cases involving people with mental illness. It doesn't make sense for people who have mental health conditions, who often would benefit more from treatment and intensive supervision than from incarceration. And it certainly doesn't make sense for taxpayers who foot the bill for high incarceration costs and overcrowded correctional facilities, and who must pay again when untreated mentally ill prisoners are released back into society, often in worse shape than when they were first locked up. Congress recognized this to be a problem in 2004 when it passed the Mentally Ill Offender Treatment and Crime Reduction Act, or MIOCRA. MIOCRA supports innovative programs that bring together mental health and criminal justice agencies to address the unique needs of people with mental health disorders. I have, as the speaker before Tony mentioned, I have legislation called the Comprehensive Justice and Mental Health Act that would reauthorize MIOCRA and continue federal support for mental health courts, crisis intervention teams, and corrections-based services for people with mental illness. My bill would also expand on the law to invest in veterans treatment courts and to train state, local, and federal law enforcement officers on how to recognize and respond to, and respond appropriately to, mental health crises, training that protects police officers and saves lives. I'll give you an example. Columbia Heights, Minnesota, it's a suburb of the Twin Cities. They gave all their police crisis intervention training. So I had a roundtable discussion there. The sheriff wasn't there. He had to be at a thing, but the county attorney was there, NACo County. And the attorney said that the sheriff got his crisis intervention training on a Tuesday, and the next day he didn't kill a guy he otherwise would have killed if he hadn't had the training. So I heard that, and I said, well, does anyone have a more garden variety example? And so I picked a policewoman who was at the table, and she said, okay, well, a few months ago, I was out on the street, and I heard a woman screaming, and I thought it was some domestic violence thing or some abuse. So I went and checked it out, and it was just this woman. And I approached her, and she went to a railing overhanging a big drop to a park, to a playground. And she threatened to jump. And I recognized that this was a mental health issue, and I used my training to talk her off the railing and get her to safety. And she told me that she had been sexually abused as a child and that the abuser had left the community and been away for a number of years, and he had just returned. And I said to her, well, I think I know where I can get you some help. And she got her some mental health, got her to a provider. She said then a few months later, I was doing a street fair, and this woman came up to me. She walked up and she said, "You saved my life." And I said, "Okay, that's your garden variety example." And she said, "Yeah." She said, "I may holster my gun once in my career. This is something I use every day." So that's your garden variety crisis intervention training story. These programs are important not just because they make it possible for counties and other state and local jurisdictions to better shoulder the burden that mentally ill offenders place on their facilities and their officers, but because research has shown that these programs work. Police officers who have received crisis intervention training report being more prepared when called to the scene of a mental health crisis. Jurisdictions that connect law enforcement with mental health professionals and training opportunities experience a decrease in arrests and an increase in access to treatment for people with mental illness, treatment that reduces recidivism and therefore reduces cost. But it's important to note that programs supported by my bill are just one piece of the puzzle. Right now, county and local governments across the country are investing in innovative programs that provide wraparound services to underserved communities and people who suffer from a mental illness or substance abuse disorder. Services like housing navigators who connect homeless individuals with the resources necessary to locate housing or apply for apartments and finally transition out of the shelter system. Very important. Community health workers who make sure high-need, high-cost patients get to their doctor's appointments and manage their health conditions. And career counselors who connect and underemployed people with vocational skills, training, and job placement. Counties that are piloting these programs, counties like Hennepin County, again, Minnesota, don't just see an improvement in health and well-being in their communities, they see a reduction in cost. As formerly frequent users of public services make fewer trips to the emergency room, to the homeless shelter, and the jail. So while enacting the Comprehensive Justice and Mental Health Act is an important first step, I hope that the mental health advocates, law enforcement officers, and local government officials who support my legislation will pursue collaborative solutions outside the criminal justice context as well. I would like to thank NACo for standing in strong support of the Comprehensive Justice and Mental Health Act and advocating tirelessly for its enactment into law. The Senate passed my bill, as you heard, in December, and I was pleased that it was unanimously approved by the House Judiciary Committee last month. It stands ready to soon pass the House as well. In fact, Speaker Ryan identified the bill as one of the consensus measures he expects to pass this year. I hope he does it soon. So with your help, we have to make sure that another Congress doesn't go by without getting this bill across the finish line. Finally, thank you to all the county officials here today for your commitment to improving how people with mental illnesses interact with the criminal justice system and to finding a solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Gotta go. Thank you again, Senator, for that. And we're pleased to be sponsoring your bill or supporting your bill, and hopefully it'll get to the president's desk. Our last speaker is going to talk a lot about what is going on in a positive light and how we don't have to accept status quo, that you can drive for innovation, you can drive for improvements, and how at the county level we're doing it through peer exchanges, how counties are learning from each other, they're testing ideas, they're traveling the country to learn from each other, and we're honored to be joined by Fulton County Chairman John Eves, who will talk about some of his recent visits to Johnson County, Kansas, outside of Kansas City, Bexar County, Texas, the most mispronounced county name in America, outside near San Antonio, but Chairman Eves.
Good afternoon. Following Senator Franken, I feel like the anticlimactic speaker this afternoon. But I certainly am happy to be here. Thank you so much, Matt. I'm proud to be with my colleagues who are very, very passionate about this issue. And let me just kind of give you a brief testimony about why this issue is important. It's not just a Northeast issue. It's not a Midwest issue, not just a West Coast issue. It's a Southern issue as well. I'm the chairman of the largest county in the state of Georgia. We have 159 counties, and metropolitan Atlanta consists of 5 counties. There are 3.5 million people in the 5 counties. Fulton County is the largest. On any given day, back in 2009, there were 13,000 people who were in our 5 jails. And with a population of 3.5 million, that was the same number of people who are incarcerated in New York City that has a population of 8 million. So we have over-incarceration in metropolitan Atlanta. A subset of the whole, Fulton County in 2009 had 48,000 people who were booked in our jail. Of that 48,000 people, and this is why it's really personal to me, 90% African-American male, 80% high school dropout. And just to support what the senator said, 70% of those incarcerated mentally ill. So we were slapped with a federal consent decree because of a lawsuit that was filed in 2006 before I assumed office. Because of overcrowdedness, we had 4,800 people in our jail, which was only designed to accommodate 2,500 people. This federal consent decree forced the county to be intentional, deliberate. We spent millions of dollars to be in compliance. And in 2015, last year, something unprecedented. We got the federal consent decree lifted because of what we began to do as a county, collaborating with our justice partners. So the good news is we reduced the number of bookings, people in our jail, from 48,000 down to 29,000 over the course of 5 years. Good news. The not so good news is the average length of stay in our jail actually got longer because we had not quite done enough in terms of our mentally ill. Many are mentally ill are taken to our jail as a default, and because they're not mentally competent to stand trial, they languish in our jail. So as Matt pointed out, I decided to go across the country to visit and learn about best practices around the country, what the King counties, the Johnson counties, the Salt Lake counties of the world are doing. And one of the things that struck me so plain and clear is what the senator talked about, is how these jurisdictions are dealing with the mentally ill. And I think one of the best strategies is how we can begin to incorporate crisis intervention training. Johnson County in Kansas City, they train a crisis intervention unit that works in partnership with law enforcement. And when there's an arrest made, this unit of trained professionals goes out with law enforcement. Law enforcement does a diagnosis of the situation and determines whether or not the person goes to the jail, goes to the crisis intervention or the provider in the community, or goes to the public health hospital. They make that determination. In Salt Lake County, Utah, they actually, as the senator pointed out, train their law enforcement units. And so we in Fulton County are beginning to look at which of those two models or a hybrid in terms of how we can work with our law enforcement community to make sure that when a person is arrested, the default option is not putting them into the Fulton County Jail. And so we believe that this is not only a cost-effective measure, but we also feel that this is the most humane measure that we can take that can resurrect lives. And so Matt and my friends, it's been a great learning experience in terms of getting best practices across the country, adding them to the already good practices that are occurring in Fulton County, because we believe that with intentionality and with being focused and being deliberate, we can reverse the tide. And if a county that had been under a federal consent decree 10 years ago can change it with bipartisan support, my friends, we can do it across this nation. So I'm proud to be a part of the NACo effort, and I just implore all of us to do a better job to try to address criminal justice so that we can be more effective in our communities. Thank you so much.
So after you hear a lineup of county leaders like this, I'm going to leave very encouraged that we have the intellectual power and the passion to get this done in a balanced way. So we have about 2 minutes, couple minutes for any questions for the panel. In the back.
Yes, I'm Lando Boyle, county attorney in Pinal County. Part of our job as county attorney is what PAs do in other counties. So a large part of it is the actual prosecution of felony offenses. With the crime rate down, like we've had reports that it is there any concern, or do you hear any concern with potentially an increase, or if we change our procedure, if we're going to have an increase in crime? Does that make sense? I don't know if that question is well worded. It's probably a bad, so right now crime rate is down. What we've been doing so far is incarcerating people. Is there any concern, or do you hear any concern that if we stop incarcerating people, that the crime rate will go up? That, I guess, is my question.
I'd like to jump in a little bit as a one-time prosecutor, briefly. Let me tell you something, that was a real fear. And when I started working diversion programs, my first one was with State Attorney Janet Reno, who felt it was more important to pursue justice than crime stats of how many you arrest and how many you hold. And I think an understanding of somebody who comes to the attention of the criminal justice system is imperative, because a lot of people don't need to be arrested, they need to be understood. And hopefully action taken, not just apprehension and arrest, but possible diversion, treatment, options for alternatives need to be presented. As a politician, not necessarily on the prosecutorial side, it was a real fear of a lot of elected officials to give an alternative to incarceration, because they immediately thought of the Willie Horton story and any other ones. So of course you're going to take a balance of it. But I got to tell you something. I can't think of a beneficial reason to incarcerate people just for mere holding them for convenience over dealing with a problem that may have resulted in an infraction to begin with. I'd like to redirect the resources, not abandon them instead of incarcerating them. And I think that's the direction that you're seeing on reform. Address it intelligently with an alternative that will work, not just a dismissive thing, as much as we're the back end now with mental health issues or anything else, incarcerating to lock them up and get them out of the way. And the last thing is, there is an entire population that presents a danger or a flight risk that needs to be incarcerated. But I think redirecting our resources in criminal justice ultimately will make them safer. We're doing it in Miami-Dade County. We're doing it in other counties across the nation with civil citation, treatment for people with mental illness, diversion for juveniles, and we're working just fine, and a lot of us have stayed elected, even though we're not saying the try 'em and fry 'em and lock 'em up philosophy.
Judge Whitley, and then we'll go to the next question.
You know, I think one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to look at our jail population and look at it in categories. We've talked about a couple of key things here. One, mental health. Those folks do not need to be in the jail. There needs to be diversion programs. We need to work with them and make sure that that for convenience sake, we're not just dropping them off in the jail. So that's one group that I think we really need to focus on. But the other group that we need to focus on are those who, first-time offenders, they did something stupid. And if you put them into the jail system and you leave them there very long, you're doing two things. One, you're starting them in that downward spiral of basically labeling them and preventing them, in a lot of instances, from being able to be successful in the future. Or you're actually putting them into, basically criminal science 101, because they're going to learn a lot from in there, and then when they get out, they're going to be so limited as to what they can do that you're almost forcing them into that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, as was mentioned by someone earlier. This is not an attempt to get bad people out early. It is an attempt to identify those folks who we can truly rehabilitate or who do not belong there in the first place, and hopefully be able to prevent them from entering into a cycle that makes it very difficult for them to get out of.
And since we were in the United States Senate, we should mention two federal policy issues that would help us. One is what we call the Medicaid jail inmate exclusion, where under the Social Security Act, they use the term incarcerated rather than adjudicated. So if you are pretrial and you have not been adjudicated through the system, you're not convicted, you still lose your federal benefits. Particularly with Medicaid and veterans, they now lose their benefits as soon as they're arrested, not convicted. That gets them off of their medication if they're in treatment for mental illness, and then it takes 60, 90, 120 days or more to get back into the system and back into treatment. So we continue this roller coaster. The second one was a quick example when the president announced his Pell Grants for job training. They limited it to prisons. And now when you heard about California with justice reinvestment and inmates staying in jail for 2 years or less, that's the population that's most likely to come back to the community and need job training. Yes, if you're in for 20 years, 30 years, we still want to treat those. But these inmates are coming back into our communities on a more short-term basis. They're going to be back there soon. And yet they're excluded from some of these job training opportunities. And they will be back in our neighborhoods in weeks, if not months. So Bob, you had one question, and then we'll wrap up.
Just a brief point, less a question. But we've heard from the larger counties, and of course NACo is largely smaller counties. But the point is this is not a big city, it's not an urban area, it's not a huge county issue. It's an issue at all counties across the nation. And that's the point that I think we need to make sure every congressman knows, and it's driving up local taxes. That's it.
Exactly. So, Mayor Lefferts, you want to make some remarks, and then I'll turn it over to...
Well, I think Sally was in line first.
No, she's make closing, so go ahead.
I want to go back to the original question that was asked about if prison populations go down, is there some fear or expectation that then crime might surge again? And I'd like to think that one of the reasons that we're seeing our populations go down is that we are starting to see some alternatives kick in that are having an impact. I'm a glass half full type fellow. I'd like to think that that's a possibility. But one of the things that we cannot really slow down on, and kind of comes into your comment there. If you look at the average person that's matriculating through the criminal justice system, what you see is this. Number one, school dropout. That's not a measure of their intelligence. Many of them are highly intelligent. I look at some of the crimes that they commit, and I say, I'm just not smart enough to be a good criminal. But you do see a very high dropout from the public education system. Secondly, very dysfunctional families. Third, very little faith engagement, no faith foundation. Four, just a dysfunctional life, emotional, physical abuse in so many cases. And if we're going to intervene, and these are the problems that we're seeing in rural America, suburban and urban, but if we're going to intervene, we're going to have to get down to that level. We're going to have to start fighting crime in our education system, in our faith community, in our neighborhoods, in our community organizations. Fighting crime is essential at that level. Fighting crime is more than police officers. Fighting crime is teachers, it's preachers, it's counselors, it's family members. That's what's going to sustain the pendulum of decreasing crime. Yes, it's nice to have cops out there, and it's nice to have good jails, but that's not the solution to the problem of crime. It's a caretaking operation until these other programs can kick in. So I would hope in our best of world that as we see improvements in education, as we see improvements in poverty, as we see improvements in unemployment, that we're going to continue to see improvements in the quality of life in our community, thus a decrease in crime.
I just want to thank you all for coming. And I do a lot of work in the human services arena, and one of my former directors sort of gave me a analogy to use. And to Mayor Luttrell's point, babies are floating down a river and people keep pulling them out to save them from drowning. And finally somebody says, did we go upstream and see who's putting these babies in the river? We've got to go upstream to find out how we can stop it from happening at the very beginning of kids and their development and what's happening to our nation. And we have to make the folks back here and in our states mindful that impacts are made when laws are changed or rules exist that actually are contrary to the very thing we're trying to correct, like the inmate exception, where we're told you need to do more for these folks, you need to get them back into the community, and they have mental health issues, and then they lose their benefits. That puts the burden back on local government, and it's contrary to some of the very policies that they're trying to fix. And that's why NACo and our policies and our ability for our steering committees to meet and get together from many different aspects, from health and human services and public safety, because nothing is an island and we all have to work together. Thank you very much for coming, and go out there and continue to support safe and secure counties. Thanks.
Enjoyed it.